Hi, and welcome to the 30 West IP February 2022 webcast update. Today we begin a series of three presentations, which will take place here in February, next month in March, and then in April on electronic plotting. And what we're going to do today is we're going to host Don from PlotNG, and then next month we'll host Ben from AirInc Direct, and then the subsequent month, Sean from Scott IPC will be joining us and showing us Scott Plot. Our objective here is to really glean their understanding of where we are in the electronic plotting industry right now, what their relationships with the FAA have told them, and what they have seen the technology do. So this is an update of a similar series we did about 18 months ago, and we hope to learn quite a bit from it. And it's really fortunate for us that we've been able to get some experts in that can show us this. So we're grateful for that. Before we jump into that, I have a little bit of housekeeping. Joe and I do have a day job. We provide international procedures training for business aviation flight departments. And we have had for some time, some years, an e-learning anywhere, anytime platform, learning management system for recurrence. Now, during COVID, we've had some time when we weren't traveling to help develop that. So we recently expanded our e-learning library to over 200% of the size that it previously was. The initial objective here was to begin to offer a initial e-learning anytime, anywhere course, which we have done and now have been able to see successfully launched for 2 months, and to update the recurrent. But in addition to that, as a byproduct of it, we ended up creating more modules, and we came up with a set of modules. And let me kill my camera here. And what we see here is we kind of put together 10 packages of different products, a package on plotting and ETP, a package on oceanic ops, a package on polar and altimetry. And what we've gotten in the past is flight departments who are doing a recurrent, and they don't really want to do another initial, but they want to cover some of the initial topics. Now, we're not doing a mix and match recurrent, but we're offering these as additional products which can be viewed through the e-learning. And we're going to hopefully at the conclusion of our three-part series add another package on electronic plotting. And as you, the client, comes to us and suggests things, this will actually expand. We're in talks now about whether we might want to put together a short series on, some of the most effective ways to use ForeFlight. So I wanted to put that out there because we do have a day job. But moving on, we have another announcement to make, and that is that based on the success of the Q&A sessions with these webcasts, we're going to start offering a weekly Q&A session with our clients. This is to support those that are working with our product and that have trained with us. And what we're going to do is in March, we're going to start doing high noon on Friday. And high noon on Friday Central Time would be an hour session where if a client has questions, they can join us for a call, and we can use material to illustrate it. We can open up courseware and illustrate the questions. And it's meant to be two things. One, more effective at answering questions because we can use the courseware and the graphics, but two, to make ourselves more accessible. Obviously, the last 2 years has changed a lot of stuff, so we're trying to change it for the better. So starting in March, Fridays at noon, and what we would ask you to do is to email us at team@30westip.com to get a registration. And we need to do a registration process it's very simple, but simply to ensure that we're providing the service to clients and not the general public. We do these webcasts and they're free and anybody can participate, but this is a client service that we're discussing here. If this registration process becomes cumbersome, we're going to listen to the clients and figure out if we need to do something different. So what I would hope is we're not going to sign up anybody in perpetuity. So don't say, hey, I want everybody in my flight department to be there every Friday and do this. That's really impractical. It's for people who have questions, who want to participate. You can bring everybody in your flight department, and we can do that, but we need to get all of their emails. Now, moving to the topic at hand and setting aside business, we're here to talk about electronic plotting. And I am trying to introduce a term, and I haven't had any luck getting any consensus on what that term would be. But what is electronic plotting? And in my small mind, I don't consider manual plotting on an electronic flight bag to be electronic plotting. I've done that. We did that back in, I don't know, 2010 or 2011. But what you're doing is you're just simply manually plotting on an electronic device. What we see is you can use tools like ForeFlight, or you can just take a chart and make a PDF writer project out of marking it and annotating it. And it does satisfy the requirements of the advisory circular, and it in fact does work. But what we're talking about today, and what we're talking about in the next couple of sessions, is computer plotting on an electronic flight bag. Now, the term computer plotting might not be the best term. I'd be open for anybody who has suggestions. But what we're trying to do is differentiate PDF drawings with a system where you get a flight plan, and that flight plan is then presented on the EFB with the plotting already done and the ETPs already done. So I'll show you the three examples that we have. Here, PlotNG, you send them your flight plan. They allow you to upload it into ForeFlight, and they'll show many options. This is an assortment of various products, and you'll see this today, the layers that can be added in and out. Now, AirInk does exactly the same thing, and they've got a lot of options on how this works. And again, the secret sauce here is the flight plan is being used to generate the routing and the ETPs, and that reduces error, and that's what this is about. Sean Scott at Scott IPC with ScottPlot has a version with many layers and a lot of capabilities and a pretty robust integration. And each of these will help us to mitigate error, to reduce the probability of having a plotting error or an execution error. And we'll talk about how that's done in the course of the next 3 weeks, and we'll hear from you as to what your techniques are, because I'm sure from the group itself, we're going to hear a lot, and that collaborative input will help us all understand this better. I'm going to suggest that we have 3 vendors that we're aware of: PlotNG, AirInk Direct, and ScottPlot, but there may be others out there. I'm not aware of them. If you are, I would ask you if you wouldn't mind to hook us up with them. Let us talk to them. Write us at team@30westip.com, and we'd like to know more about what they do, and perhaps they'd like to do a presentation, because this is an effort for all of us, all these 3 vendors and our attendees, to learn more together in a collaborative fashion. Now, we do get asked periodically, what would you recommend? And you've got to understand, we can't go there. We have to be agnostic. We don't recommend things like that. But we can suggest that you have to ask yourself, what is it that you as an organization want? So we're just going to pose a couple questions. Do you want a plotting system that's integrated with an app that you already have? That would be, advantages of having an integrated system. Or do you want something that's a little bit more robust and has some features and functionality? And that's generally done in a standalone app. And if you want those features, functionality, a standalone app is probably the best place to get it. If you don't do a lot of international operations and you find that might be a little bit more complicated than what you want, you might want to integrate it into an app that you already use for the ease of use. Now, there's going to be more questions, and we're going to learn in the next 3 months about what other people's views are on this. Now, I want to wrap this up with 6 bullet points, and I know we all hate bullet points, but this is what we've learned and gleaned talking to the vendors and talking to the FAA. It's a basic understanding that what we're talking about is not using a manual drawing tool on an electronic device. That can be done. It's not against any kind of regulation, but that's really not what we're talking about when we talk about these advanced tools. When we use these things, critical locations, validations, timid checks, things of that nature should be inserted using precise lats and longs. Now, many of you, myself included, have used pucks. You can use a bad elf puck or a dual puck or a stratus, and you could drop a pin and you can follow the aircraft location along the route with the aircraft depicted in real time on ship positioning. But that's not going to satisfy the expectations of the FAA for some of these critical checks, not perhaps all of them. And they want you to use precise lats and longs, and that's not hard. That doesn't for 1 second diminish the value and the power of having a puck. The value and the power of having a puck on an iPad and being able to annotate your position and follow it along is indisputable, and I don't think many of us would want to do without it. So I'm not suggesting that. I'm just suggesting that at this point in the process, this is the expectation. When you do a validation, a G&E check, they want you to use a certified source for that. Now, a certified source is listed in the advisory circular as the offside of the non-steering long-range nav system. Let's just say the right FMS for simplicity. There's a lot of ways to get that information. And we're going to hear more about that in the process of this discussion. And one of them is you can simply have the offside FMS up, and when you reach 10 minutes, you can take a picture and capture what that lat long is, and then you can use that lat long that you captured on that film to be able to create the position and validate it. That's fairly easy. But now, today, in many airplanes, what will happen is that offside FMS will feed the current position to the aircraft router. For those that have internet capability en route, the router can rebroadcast that position to an electronic flight bag. We were doing this, wow, decades ago almost, when we first had a CMC Marconi and we were getting it from on ships. So that's a powerful alternative, and we don't want to suggest this is the only way, but we do want to suggest it needs to come from a validated nav source. Operators should have the system, the conduct of the operation addressed in their international manual, or if they have a GOM with an international chapter, in the chapter. You might want to leave the paper plotting instructions in there and then add some instructions and say, well, we would also have the option of doing it this way. And you wouldn't want to just say, yeah, that's okay, you can use these ice pads and do that. That's not what the FAA's intent is here. It would be, this is how we do it. These are the steps and the protocols and the standards. And it doesn't have to be terribly complicated, but you can get information about this from many of the providers, and you can use it to address this. Now, crews also need to be trained. You need to be trained on however it was outlined, so you have a standardized execution of these procedures, and you can get assistance in this training from many of the providers that we're going to be talking to in the next few months. It's one of the things that we'll be talking about. But these are important elements that, if they weren't conducted, that could be a finding in an error. I was asked recently, well, do we need to, how do we document this and date it and how frequently? And we're really not there yet. If you were to tell the FAA, yeah, we all did the training, we conducted the training, here it is in our manual, I don't think we've kind of nailed down the final solution yet. Now, I'm not sure that it's going to be onerous. And then finally, the last thing to mention before we go to Don is document management procedures are going to have to be identified in the manual and implemented to ensure compliance. And this is not easy in a paper world, but it's even easier on an EFB. I mean, this doesn't get complicated with electronics, it gets easier. There's a host of ways it can be done. It can be captured on a screenshot, or there's other ways the vendors do it, and it can be emailed or put into a cloud file, or, the iOS has ways of sharing information that are very clever. Usually The place that this starts to rub would be if you're in a business aviation flight department and your company has document management procedures that are specific. And they may dictate how this is to be conducted. And that's easily one of the more difficult hurdles in this process, not the ability of an iPad to do that. So now I'm going to turn this over to Don with PlotNG, and I want to thank Don for being with us today and for doing this with us because he's been very generous. He spent a lot of time with it, and I look forward to hearing what he has to say, and then of course we'll follow with the questions.
Hello, this is Don with PlotNG. Welcome to our PlotNG version 2 update. We're very excited to announce that we're completing final testing of PlotNG version 2. Today, I'll be previewing PlotNG version 2 beginning with this keynote overview. Just to make sure that everyone is on the same page, Jeppesen has announced the sunsetting of JepFD and is recommending as its replacement ForeFlight. While JepFD was originally supposed to be discontinued in the US at the end of 2021, we note that it is still available, but will be discontinued sometime in 2022. What you're seeing is a screenshot of ForeFlight with all of PlotNG's features turned on. We'll talk about PlotNG in a moment. Given our tremendously large user base, the odds are excellent that many of you in the audience are already using PlotNG, so a short discussion is in order of what exactly has changed. For those of you who are not PlotNG customers, this keynote will give you a brief introduction as to what our philosophy and values are. Probably the single biggest change is how we handle moving flight plan information into and out of ForeFlight. The current version of PlotNG has a very slick method to load your route into ForeFlight, but it only works in Apple Mail. We provide an alternative method that works with all other email apps. There has been a rather large push in corporate flight departments to use third-party email services such as Outlook, and so we've developed an even more elegant, universal solution that works the same way in all email applications. This means if you use Outlook or Gmail, or something similar, you no longer have to download TripKit components from our servers, and there are no longer any time restrictions. All TripKit data is kept local on your iPad. The second biggest change is that we now include every capability of PlotNG in every TripKit. You no longer need to change any settings to customize PlotNG to meet your specific needs. Eliminating user settings means that account users no longer need to log into PlotNG, so we got rid of that too. Now, only one online account is needed to manage PlotNG, whether that's an owner-operator, an individual contract pilot, or a flight department manager overseeing a team of pilots. We've completely redesigned our flight plan engine to make it faster, generate highly optimized trip kits, and become even more standards-based. PlotNG's layer menu options in ForeFlight have been restructured to provide an enhanced decluttering and operational experience. More about this later. The ETP graphics were redesigned to use more industry-familiar graphics, and the ETP ancillary data was enhanced to better reflect the reality of how pilots handle contingencies. We're now providing contingency procedures as a pop-up on the map screen. Previously, the procedures loaded into ForeFlight documents. This is a much faster operation, it keeps the user on one screen, and is much more intuitive. We now only provide NAT tracks. Pacific tracks and Australian tracks are not included in the trip kit, and I'll speak more about this when we get to the track slide. All data interactions are now driven from the map screen. This is an important step in making ForeFlight as easy to use as possible with the least amount of taps required. The rule is simple. If you see a round target on the screen on any PlotNG layer, you can tap it to show additional information. The same symbol type is used on all layers, albeit color-coded. We're now providing both 10-minute checks and 5-minute checks in every trip kit. You can display none, either, or both. It's up to you. Of course, if you're a 135 operator, you'll need an LOA from the FAA to use different G&E checkpoint locations. Lastly, I'll note that during the past year, the FAA rather quietly removed a large chunk of information from 8900.1 regarding Class II airspace and oceanic operations. Only recently have they replaced it with updated language. Regardless of their intent, on its face, there is a bit of a disconnect about where exactly one needs to plot G&E checkpoints. PlotNG continues to provide suggested locations where it would be a terrific idea to do these checks. We're a bit conservative in the way we provide our recommendations, but our feeling is that it's always better to have more checkpoints and not need them than to come up short. At the end of the day, 91.3 prevails, so this decision is always the pilot in command's responsibility. That said, for those of you who fly polar routes, you'll note that there are more suggested G&E checkpoints than before. Whereas many FMS manufacturers tell operators to switch to true course navigation when above 70 degrees north latitude, when it comes to G&E checks, we suggest that any waypoints located above 65 degrees north latitude should be checked, especially in the vicinity of Iceland, where the magnetic variations widely diverge. These refinements are intended to make PlotNG virtually transparent to your operation. It just works. But first, I'd like to frame the conversation to help you understand how we think about electronic plotting. We understand the limitations of using iPads in the cockpit. A proven strategy to mitigate software lockups and reduce user input errors is to run only one application at a time. PlotNG, which is a for-flight add-in, is an automatic solution to this problem. A principal goal of PlotNG version 2 is to make an already easy-to-use service even simpler. Pilots not flying internationally on a regular basis will enjoy how easy it is to learn to use and to maintain currency with PlotNG. The primary way we achieve this is to fully automate reading and interpreting the data in your flight plan, and then translating that into simple pictures, all without having you manually enter a single piece of data. There are two parts to managing the data of any international flight. The pre-flight planning, which includes the flight plan, the ETPs, and the plot, or what we call the static data, and the in-flight data updates, which include G&E checks and master document updates, or what we call the dynamic data. PlotNG believes that you should use the best tool available for the job. There are a myriad of ways to store and manage your data, and we encourage you to use whichever solution works best for you. PlotNG is a bit unorthodox in the way it works. Simply put, you forward the flight plan PDF email you receive from your provider directly to PlotNG. And under 1 minute, you'll receive an email, which is what we call a trip kit, that contains your complete electronic plotting solution. We can read the flight plans from all of these providers, regardless of the format you choose to use. You don't need to change your provider, your format, or your procedures. Do everything exactly the same way as you've done before. There's no retraining, and no procedural SOPs that need to be rewritten to accomplish this step. You'll notice that ARINC Direct and ForeFlight Dispatch are also included in this list. I made a pun in the title of this slide, but you should take it rather seriously. If you don't have your oceanic charts in order, or you don't know how to use your electronic plotting solution, then you really shouldn't start your engines. As I review PlotNG, I'll be referring to these principles to help you understand why we do things the way we do. Probably the number one question we get is how to do G&E checks. I'll note that question has everything and yet nothing to do with PlotNG. We think portable GPS devices such as Bad Elf, Stratus, Dual, etc. are the bee's knees. Not only do they provide a completely independent source of navigation, but they do it with wicked precision. Many, if not most, aircraft are equipped with onboard Wi-Fi. That said, you can only use one source of nav data at a time, and the FAA wants you to use a certified source. That means your non-steering FMS. There are several ways to get your present position into ForeFlight. Manual entry, a portable device connected via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, or your non-steering FMS through your ship's Wi-Fi. If you're lucky enough to have onboard Wi-Fi, and your ARINC 429 data bus is connected to the network, you'll have automatic access to a certified navigation source, and your G&E checks will be nothing more than a single tap on the screen. As an aside, if you have onboard Wi-Fi but you turn it off while oceanic, it's very possible that your local area network will still function. So you'll more than likely be able to continue to view own ship and display present position as reported from your non-steering FMS. Okay, this is what the new TripKit email looks like. And by the way, everything that you're seeing today could change before version 2 hits the streets, but I'm betting that won't happen. Notice that the blue button to load your route into ForeFlight was removed. We've replaced that with the Load Route attachment. This attachment will work with any email application and functions exactly the same way regardless of the app you use. Also notice the size of the content pack. It's 23 kilobytes. This is down from 600 kilobytes. Because of this reduction in size, in-flight reroutes that could benefit from a new PlotNG trip kit no longer require any special PlotNG commands in the subject line of the email. Everything downloads in an instant. Your Wi-Fi costs are much less expensive, and your connectivity will be far more reliable. We now add the departure and destination airports to the route. Should you have any company security software that prevents proper operation of the load route attachment, you will always be able to easily copy and paste this route directly into ForeFlight. The magnetic course and distance calculations are optimized to only display what is actually needed. ForeFlight now has the ability to easily provide the same information. Now, we don't know if ForeFlight uses ARINC 424 data to determine the magnetic variation, or if they calculate the magnetic variation using the World Magnetic Model or some other analytical method. We use the World Magnetic Model and we document what we do. This means there is a very high degree of likelihood that what you see on your PFD will match what's in our report. I'm calling this slide the kitchen sink, but it's really just a screenshot of almost every PlotNG feature turned on. During normal operation, you probably won't be displaying all of these layers. Though it's not actually required, we put the TMI on every track label to enhance situational awareness and communications with ATS. Note that all of the plotting graphics are completely taken care of by PlotNG. There is no reason to use any of the graphic drawing tools provided in ForeFlight. That is for the purpose of meeting the requirements of AC 9170B. We're using new symbology for ETPs, and regardless of direction of flight, we make sure the arrows correctly suggest the direction to initially turn in the event of a course deviation. Note the ETP locations are denoted with much smaller color-coded circles or bullseye icons. As I said before, anytime you see a bullseye, you can tap on it for more information. Most significantly, the Layers menu has been completely redesigned to make them much easier to read and provide for a more intuitive set of options. The ETPs are grouped according to diversion airport pairs. This allows you to declutter your map and display only the next ETP group on the screen. Also note that there are two different G&E layers, 10 minutes and 5 minutes. Choose the one most appropriate to your SOPs. About a year ago, ForeFlight included in their Jeppesen NOTAMs the oceanic contingency procedures. Of note was the fact that not all FIR regions included these notes. PlotNG has always and continues to provide a contingency bullseye strategically located near the oceanic route segment. When tapped, it brings up effectively ICAO 15.2 Oceanic Contingency Procedures. It's right on the map screen, it's quick, it's easy, and it's there when you need it. Of course, we've added enhanced text formatting so it's much easier to read. Displaying ETPs on the route is only one piece of the puzzle. The other piece is to highlight the diversion airports. We used to color code airports according to their use: green for one engine inoperative, blue for depressurization, red for medical, and black for PNR or PSR. What we learned is that only on rare occasion do operators file a partial complement of ETP contingencies. So we decided to make the plotting chart even easier to read and choose colors and highlights that work terrific in daytime or nighttime in reverse video. Now that you can declutter ETPs by group, we found that there is no longer any need to include the ETP 100 layer, that is, replacing 3 ETPs with just the most fuel-critical ETP. When you tap on the white bullseye located adjacent to the ETP arrowheads, you'll get altitude and speed to the diversion airport. Because ETP data is only valid at the ETP point, we've eliminated all point-specific information to get from the ETP to the diversion airport. We could have provided a multitasking add-in to give you dynamic information about where the ETP is relative to your present position. But given the relatively rare occurrence of emergencies, our opinion is that it serves little purpose. Use your FMS to get this data. It is the certified source. And don't forget, you can quickly use the two-finger salute and have ForeFlight give you direction, time, and fuel from your present position to any place on the world by using the measuring tool. The graphical reroute solution is still available, and if feedback from the field has told us anything, is that you guys love it. Again, unless you've hit the trifecta and get a full reroute clearance, simply accept your CPDLC message, manually edit your ForeFlight route by dragging or rubber banding fixes, or use the route editor. It's much quicker. But if you want to generate a new PlotNG trip kit, there are no special options to learn or remember. We removed them. Note the diversion airport on the right side of the screen. Note the G&E checks. We've renamed them from the pilot vernacular of 10-minute check to G&E 10 check. This is the FAA preferred nomenclature. Remember, you're checking your navigation performance for any cross-track errors. You're not checking your time. We're showing the 10-minute checks here in yellow. The 5-minute checks are in a muted orange to help differentiate them. It's important to note that you might have a 5-minute G&E checkpoint, but not a 10-minute G&E checkpoint. We won't display a suggested point if, for example, the next fix occurs before 10 minutes at your filed cruise speed, or if the next fix is a ground-based nav aid and you're within the service volume. There are several other edge cases that we consider to help simplify your ADM. The G&E checks are best performed using ForeFlight's marked positions. They are beyond precise, and depending on your GPS present position source, may not require any manual data entry. And most important, it's a way that we leverage the capabilities to integrate with ForeFlight while embracing best practices. When PlotNG was first introduced, marked positions were not offered in ForeFlight, so we suggested entering your latitude and longitude in the search box, or create a user waypoint to mark the position. We didn't care for that because there was too much opportunity for data entry errors. ForeFlight then offered marked positions, and voila! We always encourage pilots to use the simplest and most precise ways to enter latitudes and longitudes. Note that you can also add any additional information besides the time in Zulu, so the need to write anything on your ForeFlight screen with the annotation tools is completely eliminated, at least for this exercise. There have been some significant operational changes to the NAT tracks, and we expect more changes coming this year. By virtue of the critical nature of these tracks and the procedures they require flight crews to explicitly follow, we've decided to provide the full track message customized for the track and available as a pop-up on the map screen. As always, we provide the TMI number for enhanced situational awareness and reporting. If a flight level also corresponds to a PBCS level, we'll indicate that in the flight level section as well. There are two significant reasons why we include these tracks at all. First, in ForeFlight, you cannot display their tracks, which appear on the aeronautical layer, at the same time you're displaying a Jeppesen oceanic chart. PlotNG can display our tracks over any chart. And second, ForeFlight tracks are temporal, meaning that when a new track message is published, ForeFlight will display that new information. That's great for the flight, but not so great 3 months from now when you might be responding to an inquiry regarding a possible pilot deviation. Our tracks are static, so if you were to reload the trip kit in 3 months, you'll see the tracks exactly as they appeared on the day of the flight. There's no right or wrong answer to this one, just a different perspective. I'd also note that there are 3 specific items in a SAFA check that directly pertain to oceanic plotting charts. You could think of our solution as a CYA strategy. We've eliminated Pacific and Australian tracks. Besides the fact that Australia hasn't issued a track message in over a year, both of these oceanic track systems are used more for routing and less procedurally, although, and it bears repeating, that all oceanic deviation procedures are fundamentally the same worldwide. Again, we're trying to simplify things for you. If you want or need these tracks, use ForeFlight. You can always mitigate the problem of displaying ForeFlight tracks over a Jeppesen oceanic chart by simply choosing to display the free FAA's PAC chart instead. We have a number of technical publications that we can provide to you just for the asking, including this one that describes the legal basis for using PlotNG and provides guidance for updating your SOPs, including sample checklists. PlotNG is not an EFB. ForeFlight is the EFB. We operate as an add-in to ForeFlight, and it's for this reason and because you can always carry a spare blank chart. PlotNG is not mission critical, so there are no special approvals needed to use PlotNG. 135 operators will more than likely need to specifically state which electronic plotting solution they use, but again, specific approval is not required for PlotNG. If you use a separate app for electronic plotting, all bets are off, and you'll more than likely need to obtain approval from your PI. As I said earlier, PlotNG takes only 10 minutes to learn how to use. Training can be described as learning how to load a route and flight plan, calling up the various plotting layers, and removing the data from your iPad. There are absolutely no other procedures you need to know regarding PlotNG because there is no data entry. However, there are plenty of procedures you'll need to learn about ForeFlight. Which brings us to document management. This is the second most frequent technical support question we receive. Ironically, most of our technical support is consumed by ForeFlight related questions, and we're happy to help. PlotNG deliberately does not include any type of data management, and in fact in version 2, we've removed the email archive capability. Frankly, it costs us nothing to provide it, but we believe its presence hampers the decision-making process flight departments and contract pilots should be actively engaged in. And by the way, this functionality is trivial to set up on your own. PlotNG does not want to impose its methodologies on you regarding your 6-month storage requirements. Many flight departments have IT departments that oversee their data center operations, and this also includes regulating software use to mitigate security concerns. Fundamentally, we want our customers to use a solution that works best for them and empowers them to maintain their own data. The FAA is right that every flight department needs to think through and implement a plan for a document management standard and then adhere to it. As part of our product demos, we always show pilots how you can easily manage your master document from within ForeFlight, and doing it without requiring an Apple Pencil or any additional software. But there are many other terrific apps that pilots regularly use and depend on for their daily workflows, for example, GoodReader, and we say, go ahead and use them. Because you may not fly a lot of oceanic trips each year, you may want to keep your master document update procedures as simple as possible. In fact, you just might want to continue using your kneeboard and a pencil. Of course, at the end of the trip, you can use your iPad to take pictures of the 3 or 4 pages in your master document containing your notes and then save them to your storage device. It's now in an electronic form, easily searchable and retrievable, so there's really no reason to overthink or overcomplicate this task. However, we know that many flight departments want to go completely electronic, that is, no more paper in the cockpit. There are many ways to accomplish this goal, from simply annotating a digital version of a master document, think ForeFlight, all the way to a full custom application that tracks every step and requires continuous data management. At PlotNG, we prefer to keep it simple. ForeFlight provides several mechanisms for storing data on its server, storing data on your own server, storing data in the cloud, or sharing data with third-party apps. iOS provides for even more diverse solutions. As all of these aviation services and apps evolve, you can certainly look forward to new emerging solutions. And you can rest assured that PlotNG will always strive for the simplest possible solution. If this is your first time using electronic plotting, an easy way to store your trip data is to use a free online email account such as Gmail or Outlook, or a free cloud storage account such as Google Drive or Dropbox. You can transition to a more sophisticated model as you gain experience and develop a better understanding of your long-term needs. Or you can unleash your inner power user without any investment other than your time and weave together a custom solution that models your company's workflows by using Apple's iOS shortcut app that's included with every iPad. The choice is yours. If you'd like more information or would like to schedule a free demo training session for your flight department, please call us. We're here to help. So once again, I'd like to thank Mitch and Joe of 30 West IP for hosting these wonderful community spotlight webinars. I hope you've enjoyed learning about PlotNG's approach to electronic plotting and previewing our version 2 enhancements. I have my iPad connected to Zoom and will display it momentarily, and I would be delighted to take your questions.
Thank you, Don. I really appreciate that, and enjoyed the look at the way you view what's going on in this industry and how it's best managed. And before we go to Q&A, what I want to do is launch a poll and find out from the group here what it is that your experience is with plotting. So if you'd help us out there, it's anonymous, so nobody knows what your answers are, and it'll kind of inform us. I'll share this with everybody, so it will kind of inform us as to where we are in the industry. And we're getting some pretty good participation. While we're doing this, I want to mention, for some odd reason, this is a Zoom webcast, and we had over 100 people sign up on GoToWebinar, and we didn't send the invitation out on GoToWebinar. I'm not entirely sure how that happened, but I want to apologize if somebody watches this later in a recording for the confusion. We have always used GoToWebinar in the past. We are accommodating a request by some of the presenters to use Zoom. So that hasn't worked well for us. So we hope that we can make this available online soon. Now the poll is over. I'm going to share the results. We have 46% using paper charts. We have 13% manually plotting on an EFB. As you can see, 19% with PlotNG, 36% with AirInk, and 2% with Sean. We have 1% with other. And if you're in the other, if you have, like I mentioned, if you have a application that does this, that you'd share with the group here in the questions, that would be very, very helpful. So
Mitch, you want to put up our splash page with our team address on it?
Yes, I'll do that. Thank you. And we've had a couple folks already suggest that that what they would like to do is they'd like to sign up for the Q&A session. What I'd like to remind you is if you want to sign up for the Q&A, you need to do that by individual. So if you sent me an individual email, we'll sign you up for the first one in March, but it won't be for everyone. You'll have to sign up for each one individually, and we're going to adapt that as it goes. And we're not prepared to sign up whole departments unless you give us a list of all the emails. So if you're hearing this and that was one of you, I will respond to those emails. But we're going to go into the Q&A session for this. And Joe, would you help us out with the questions here, and you and Don?
Absolutely. And Steve and Daryl, I see your hands are raised, but I think you guys submitted in the questions. Well, Steve, you did. So if you guys will just type into the Q&A panel, click on that panel at the bottom of your screen. And now I'm seeing, I think, Don's screen. Don is transferring his iPad there. So Mitch, you want to take over and put our splash on there? Now, Steve, if you want to submit your question, well, I see you did that already. Okay, good. Thank you. Now I'll start off with this one question that's been upvoted a couple of times, and it's Chris asking about, do we know if ForeFlight has any plans or if they're working on a plotting solution? Mitch, do you have any information on ForeFlight's intentions?
They have, I think, like many of you, informally shared with us that is their intent. I don't know how far or where it is on their priorities. I do know that it appears that their highest priority right now is to restore the smart notes that were in JEPFD and to place those into ForeFlight. That's the reason that ForeFlight was allowed. That's the reason that JEPFD was allowed to continue to be used for some time. And I think that's their first priority. We would love to see more from them. We have, we're huge ForeFlight supporters. We love what they do, but right now we're unsure of that.
Okay, thank you. And I think maybe Don is preparing to answer one of the questions, but I'm just going to start at the top and work our way down. REA is asking, and hello, REA, good to see you again. Hi, I need help with this ARINC 424 bus issues on our G280 and G550. No one seems to know how to determine this. Anybody have any, he says, I meant ARINC 429. How do we know if this is showing own ship?
John, do you
Maybe
want to
Don
address
will
that?
I think the simple answer is that if you are able to connect your iPad to your ship's Wi-Fi, and you're able to see that the present position that is displayed on your ForeFlight iPad device is the same as what's on your non-steering FMS, that's the simple way to verify that you're getting the correct information.
Yeah, that's true. The communication service provider would probably be a good place to start asking that question, because the communication service provider is the one that's managing the router in the airplane, I believe. And what I'm going to do is allow, if somebody else in the organization or somebody here in the audience has a better answer than that, I would certainly like to hear that, because I'm not the smartest person on that for sure.
Martin is asking, when is version 2 due, to be released? We have a transatlantic flight next week.
So I can tell you that it won't be released next week, but I can also tell you that because it's software, there's no software manufacturer that will ever give you a guaranteed date. I'll just say that it's right around the corner. Think weeks, not months.
Okay.
Very good. Ed, I see your hand is raised as well. Mitch, do you want to open Ed's mic, or do you want to have him type it in?
Ed, you can go ahead, and I'm going to open your mic.
Okay, just a comment on the 424 stuff. Just because you can hook up to the Wi-Fi doesn't necessarily mean that the position information you're getting is coming from the aircraft. Because if you've got a Wi-Fi that has a GPS location, some airplanes you can get GPS through the windscreens and some you can't. So you'd have to verify where your information for position is actually coming from.
Okay. Thank you, Ed. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Good input. Thanks. Steve is asking, I'm not fully clear on how we would save the completed plotting chart for a flight. Screenshot, export, etc.
Okay, so that's an excellent question. And that gets into a demo that I'm going to give you right now. So let me start at the beginning and take about 10 seconds to show you how you get your data into ForeFlight. And then we can talk about what you would do about getting your data out of ForeFlight. So what you're looking at on the screen right now is an email in the iOS email app. And at the bottom of this email are two attachments, the load route and the content pack. I'm going to tap on the load route. It brings up a blue button. And when I hit this, I can now load the route directly into ForeFlight. So there's the route that was from that flight plan. I'm going to go back to the email. And I'm now going to load the content pack. So this is just a matter of sharing the content pack with ForeFlight. And that's all there is to setting up your PlotNG electronic plotting solution. To access the layers, you merely scroll up the right side and you can see that we have a whole bunch of new layers here. I'll turn on ETP1. I'll put on the G&E checks, and I'll even put on some NAT tracks. And I'll zoom in on the area so you can see what this looks like on the screen. So there's not a lot of work that you have to do. It's only a few taps to get the information into ForeFlight. Now, as you progress along on the flight, you will have G&E checks. We always suggest that when you drop the pin, you should also take a screenshot of that point on the screen, plus maybe 1 or 2 points left and right of it, so you have some context. And this has nothing to do with the 6-month data, but it has everything to do with a SAFA check. So if, for example, an inspector wanted to see something regarding plotting at the end of your flight, you would have a picture that you can quickly convert into a PDF on your iPad and email it to them, which is a perfectly legitimate way of doing business. But saving that, the drop pins or the marked positions can be saved automatically in ForeFlight if you were to load information into the flight section of ForeFlight. And that is retrievable later, so you can electronically save the data file itself, or you can take screenshots and save the screenshots, which is a perfectly legitimate way of doing it. Or when it comes to handling the master document, if you edit the master document in ForeFlight, and we can certainly show you how to do that, you would then be able to email the saved copy of the master document with all of your annotations, either to a storage device or an email, or to a connected server that your company may use. So there's a lot of options, and we place no restrictions on what you can and can't do with PlotNG.
So Don, while you're on the demonstration, a couple of questions here from Craig. How do I delete previous data, plots, ETPs on ForeFlight, deleting previous selected layers?
Okay, so that's a two-part question. The first part is, if you want to turn off a layer, for example, I want to turn off the ETP group 1 and turn on ETP 2, you just merely tap the layer on the layer control. So you can clutter and declutter your screen as much or as little as you want. This is up to you. At the end of the flight, if you want to purge this content pack out of ForeFlight, you go to More, select Custom Content on the right side, and you'll notice on the left side, we have TripKit U9876. Tapping on that shows you the details of this content pack that we just loaded in from PlotNG. And at the very bottom of the screen, you have a delete content pack option where when you tap that, it will remove it from the system and you start from scratch. It's that simple.
Wow. Excellent. Thanks, Don. Steve, I see you have your hand raised, but I also see you wrote your question in. So I'm going to assume they're the same. If they're different, please let me know. Steve says, we have 8 pilots in our flight department. Would each pilot need a PlotNG account for the most convenient access?
So the answer to that is no. The most convenient way to do it is set up one account for your flight department. The account manager would have the primary login. They would then add the other 7 pilots as authorized users on that account. And when any one of the pilots sends in a flight plan to then get a PlotNG trip kit, they share that trip kit with the rest of the pilots. So you're only paying for one trip. You're not paying per pilot, you're not paying per plane, and you're not paying per iPad.
Excellent. Thanks. Timothy asks, or actually Timothy makes a comment, and yeah, we're sorry about that, Timothy, about GoToWebinar link. I think what has happened is we originally set this up on GoToWebinar, and I think it automatically sent out the registration. We didn't go in and kill it. We switched to Zoom because our presenters are more experienced with Zoom and they like Zoom better. So we started on Zoom for this webinar. We apologize for that GoToWebinar link having been sent out automatically.
And Tim, I own that. That's the hazard of being an elderly man in this industry is I don't recall ever sending the GoToWebinar invite. I had set it up, and obviously there were over 100 people that signed up for it. So there isn't any question about the fact that that was done incorrectly. So we just hope that perhaps they'll be able to view this on the web, on the YouTube channel. So my apologies. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that feedback because we are obviously oblivious to that when this webinar started.
Now, Ed, I see your hand is up. Do you have another comment to follow up on something we recently said?
Yeah, I was just commenting on it's Josh saying on his 550, they've got the A-Ring 429 in white below the accuracy readout. So I was guessing it's a SATCOM direct jet because I have not seen that on the A-Ring jets.
I think there's a second vendor that's doing that as well. And I know that Sean's going to address that because in conversations with Sean, he mentioned that. And this again is something that is in his wheelhouse as well. So we'll get a solid answer on that when we talk to him in April.
And to give context to the answer for the recording, the question was when we connect our G550 in ForeFlight, we see A-Ring 429 in white below the accuracy readout on the map. And that's where Ed responded. He thinks it's a SATCOM direct service provider for the satellite link. All right, good. And thanks again, Ed. Steve, great answers. You're welcome. Thank you. Appreciate that. Mike asks, how are reroutes handled with regards to updated ETPs?
Okay, that's a really good question. And so if it turns out that you have a reroute and there's only one or two fixes that move, for example, and let me get the flight plan editor out of the way, I'm going to drag and drop one of these fixes up here to a new location. And I'm just picking a random location just to demonstrate that we needed to circumnavigate around where we were supposed to go. I could have edited it by dragging it on the screen, or I could have literally typed in the latitude and longitude by going into the route editor. If it's only one or two fixes, the quickest way is to simply just edit your flight plan on the screen. The question then arises is what happens to the ETPs? Well, let's display some ETPs that may have been in that area. So you'll notice now that this ETP does not move because it's static in the way that it's drawn on the screen, but the route itself moved. So how do you know where that ETP gets relocated? Well, there's two ways to do it. The simple way is that we provide a reroute layer. And you'll notice that we're drawing the graphical extension line solutions. We see the two diversion airports that are on the screen at the top and the left side in orange. And if you were to draw a great circle line that connected those two airport pairs and then a 90-degree great circle bisector through the ETPs, that's what these extension lines are that we've drawn for you. So by zooming in, where the red and blue lines intersect the new course line, that's where the ETPs would be relocated. This is the same exact solution that you would use on pencil and paper if you were doing plotting manually. If, however, you've got a complicated reroute, for example, they didn't just change one or two fixes, but they gave you a complete reroute, even if you're not flying on the track system, you might then want to get a new flight plan from your provider, have them Wi-Fi it to your aircraft, and then you can send another request out to PlotNG. And because the information that we're sending back is so small in size, it'll come back immediately and you can reload in the brand new processed flight plan. So you have two options depending on the complexity of the reroute.
Very good. Thanks, Don.
And Martin's making a point, and a very good point. This is assuming similar winds at the new location, and I'll go a little bit beyond that. I think that there are similar solutions in AirRink, and they correctly show where the new ETP is, but it would be important to note that that doesn't tell you how it affects fuel. And if you're tight on fuel and then it moves, that would compromise your ability to avoid a wet footprint. So there are fuel considerations that go when you get a reroute as well. Sean has a way of inputting the current winds and correcting the route with winds and flight level information like that, but it doesn't consider fuel either. So you do get a corrected ETP, but you don't get any fuel information. And that doesn't diminish the fact that it helps. That's the reason, as Don was talking about, getting a new flight plan and getting a new route from your flight plan provider is so helpful, because there you would have a solution that reflects the correct fuel.
Thanks, Mitch. Excellent. Ed, do you have another comment? I see your hand.
See if I can.
Okay. All right. Very good. Awesome. Well, I will lower the hands. Thank you, sir. And then that concludes the questions that we currently have. And that does take us almost to the full hour. So, Mitch, Don, do you have any closing comments?
I want to thank Don and thank all of the attendees for participating. This has been really an informative process for us. And at the end of 3 months, I think we're all going to know a lot more about what's going on in the industry. So we really appreciate it. And Don, I'll turn the closing remarks to you.
I just really want to thank both you and Joe again for hosting these webinars. I think they're such a terrific idea, and it's going to be a wonderful opportunity for everybody in the industry to learn about what options are out there, and how to think about it and how we can get ideas from each other as to how to improve the state of events. This is a very dynamically changing field right now because the technology is still relatively new. And there's a lot of movement going on with the different types of EFB software applications that are out there. And every pilot has their own opinion, and there is no right or wrong answer. It's just different ways of thinking about it. So kudos to you guys for doing what you're doing. And I'd like to, again, thank you very much for the opportunity today.
Oh, we appreciate it. And on a final note, this idea came from a client. We had somebody reach out and prior to recurrence say, have you got any updates on what you did with the electronic plotting about 18 months ago? And can you give us some thoughts on where electronic plotting is evolving? So anybody that's out there today, if you have those kinds of questions about other topics, share them with us, because that's what we use to try to develop these topics. I have 2 topics sitting in presentations that weren't quite this caliber. So this was really, it went to the top of the list. So thank each and every one of you. And we'll sign off, and we hope to see you next month when we get together with Ben and the Air Ink Direct folks.
Thanks, everyone.